Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be talking about the tight end draft class, and I think it's a pretty solid one, not going to lie. Are there any really tier 1 guys? No, I gave that to Brock Purdy last year. Like I said, I knew he would be a superstar coming to the NFL. I feel like there are 2 stars. I don't feel super duper confident they're going to be superstars, but stars nonetheless. And then 4 guys I kind of want to talk about that I feel like have a particular role in the NFL that I think they could end up working out and having an impact on whatever team they draft them. So let's really get into it. So top 6, start off with 6, and we're going to talk about Terrance Ferguson from Oregon. Now, Terrance Ferguson from Oregon, like I said, I got into him like early on in the offseason, mainly because initially, as a Panthers fan, I didn't know we were going to re-sign Tommy Tremble. I'm glad that we did, but initially I was like, maybe we might move in a different direction, and let's see what like a potential tight end 2 could be. And that's the reason why I started really diving into Terrance Ferguson, and I really liked what I saw. Obviously, there's some things that needs to be cleared up, especially his run blocking ability, which is not good. So he needs to really work on like his fundamentals, and especially a lot of people are kind of calling him out for his grit. I don't want to call him out for like not trying because I think that's a little bit. I think that's a little bit too much. I don't want to ever do that in my evaluation, but he does need to work more on his technique. But as far as like some of his routes, and also his spatial awareness, I think he does a really good job as far as finding spaces in the zone. Even though he's not the best against man, like I said, I think he's more of like a tight end 2 role that I think with more coaching, with that learning curve that a lot of times going to have in the NFL. Hopefully by like year 3, he starts to break out and he starts to like have a better role in the NFL, a better role in the offense, or he gets put in a spot where he is not the guy, but he's in a specific role that I feel like he can work on the NFL. One of the things I kind of want to talk about as far as like some of the good games is against Ohio State. Like I said, that was a really great game for him. I mean, really, really, interesting game between back and forth between both of them the first time around. And then also I want to talk about the Wisconsin game. Wisconsin game, it was like 16-13, like I said. It was a very defensive-minded game. Oregon couldn't really get anything on offense except really through Terrance Ferguson. Like I said, Terrance Ferguson did a really good job in that game of keeping them in the game when nothing was really going right. The only really bad game that he had was UCLA. If I remember correctly, that might be like a 1-catch, 11 yards kind of game. I think part of that could also just be the fact that, it just might not have been that kind of day. Tight end is one of those kind of fickle things where sometimes it could be, all the offense kind of goes through, or it could be just like we barely use you today. So like I don't know. It's one of those kind of weird things. But I do want to say that I think because of his inability to be a good run blocker, he needs to go to a place that's going to be able to develop him in that. And that's the reason why one of the great fits that I think could possibly be for him is the Tennessee Titans. I think if he goes there, they have a Chigakonkwo who's more like I don't know how the best way to put it, but it's simply like just chess piece because you kind of move him pretty much anywhere. Sometimes he can be a big slot, sometimes he can be like as like a fullback. But if you put him and Terrance Ferguson on the field at the same exact time, I think that's a really good combo because you have a little bit bigger body with Terrance Ferguson. I think the fact that you were able to have him with Callahan, who's coaching up the offensive line, if you're able to work with him to as far as like improve his run blocking ability, then I think that he could potentially be a pretty solid tight end 2 with him and Chigakonkwo. So I think that's a really great fit for him. Obviously, more likely they're going to take Cam Ward, so you get both of them rookies to be able to work together. Another one that I kind of looking at is like potential the Jets. Now the Jets actually had a dinner with him after his pro day, so it definitely shows interest in him. I think Jets are going to take a tight end. Don't know where it's going to be. I have a couple of these players that I could potentially see them depending on what the role is going to be. But Terrance Ferguson, I would not want him to go to the Jets as a starter, but like I said, as a tight end 2, developmental, then I feel pretty confident with that. And then the last one is kind of like I would just say is more of a definite tight end 2 with a veteran presence in front of him that he can learn from, while also having familiarity, and that's going to be the Broncos. Like I said, you can already see on the screen. I think he was from Colorado. He worked with Bo Nix last year, and also the fact that you have him, having meetings with the Broncos, and the Broncos looking for a tight end, even though they did get, goodness gracious, I'm losing my train of thought. Jaguars tight end, Evan Ingram. Goodness gracious! Like I said, I still think the Broncos will take another tight end, even though they got Evan Ingram, because one, Evan Ingram sometimes gets hurt, and two, Evan Ingram is also like what 30 years old. Like he's getting up there in age, so you also have like I like almost like a understudy for him. One, insurance, but also understudy. So I think Terrance Ferguson going to the Broncos, like I said, they can focus on another player in the first or second round because I think Terrance Ferguson is probably go probably third round in my opinion, and I think that's perfectly fine for him. I think a little bit lower expectations with the expectations of being on the field early on in a tight end 2 role. Moving on to my number 5 tight end, that's going to be Elijah Arroyo from Miami. I want to put him higher. I really do. But his injury history is very, very concerning to me. Now, obviously, like as far as talent-wise, I thought that he did a really good job in 2024, especially as Cam Ward came in, he really flourished. Some of his development also was hampered by those injuries. But the second half of like the 2024, like I said, he had a really good stretch. And a lot of those comebacks that Miami had, he was super duper important in those games. Like I said, like he early on he was really good in that Florida game, the Virginia Tech game, that was another one too, and then the Georgia Tech game. Even though it was more of just like a one play kind of ordeal where like he had like a 74-yard reception, like I said, like just one play. I still think it kind of shows like the explosiveness of Elijah Arroyo, but man, I'm just like I'm really really concerned about his injury history. So that's what's going to knock him down a little bit for me because I think that somebody's going to be able to find a role for him, but because like I said, it's one of those things where like I don't want to knock a player down too hard, but if it becomes a problem in the college, it's probably going to be a problem in the pros. So I think he's going to fall, unfortunately. But if he goes to a team, like I said, some of the places that I think he could go to is like the Texans. The Texans are still looking for a tight end. Obviously, they paid Dalton Schultz, but if you talk to any Texans fan, they pretty much hate his guts. Like talking to Luke, you've heard him ramble sometimes about Dalton Schultz. They hate him there, but he would be a really good role in that Texans offense. Interested to see how the new offense coordinator does there. Also, I think another one is like I just mentioned before, the Titans. Him going with Cam Ward would be a pretty deadly matchup because I think him and Chig Okonkwo are more so receiving options that I think that could like definitely trying to the word make the offense not be as bad as it was last year because it was. I mean, obviously, Will Levis is a big problem, but there wasn't a lot of creativity that I was kind of hoping for. Then when Callahan was coming over, I think some of that just has to do with the fact of like the players that he had there. But it'll be interesting to see if he's able to pair with Cam Ward and see if they can kind of recreate that magic they had from last year. And another one I kind of was looking for is potentially like the Giants. I know they have Theo Johnson, Penn State tight end from was it about 2 or 3? I can't remember when Theo Johnson came out, but I still think that the Giants need more options. I think he'll be, like I said, in that role of being a smaller tight end compared to Theo Johnson, being more that tight end too. I think that could probably work for him. But I'm really I see the talent. I see what people like about him, but the injuries was really going to bring him down for me. Even though I think, in a certain sense, I think he could probably work out in the NFL as long as he can stay healthy. Fourth one is going to be what a lot of people are thinking they're tight end 3s. I'm putting him a tight end 4 because I really like the guy above him. And at 4, I'm going to have Harold Fannin Jr. Now, I want to preface this by saying, yes, Harold Fannin Jr. is pretty small for a tight end. He's more of a big slot than anything. He'd probably be a better situation for there. That's a little bit of the reason why I'm knocking him down a little bit because that's a super specific role. It's kind of the role that a Chig Okonkwo kind of has, which I think the Harold Fannin could fit that role wherever he goes. But there's not a lot of offenses that need that guy. So I think that's going to bring him down a little bit. However, as far as talent-wise, he's got great like yak ability. Like you're able to see like he just runs through people. Like I said, he's 6'3", like 240. Like I said, he's kind of he's like a true big slot like tight end that is definitely not going to be your primary blocker. But you put him into screen action. You put him into like some of these. I think like especially across the middle, I think he's like fearless. I really like the fact that against great competition and Bowling Green not being the best team, he showed out. Like I said, some of his good games include Penn State and also Texas A&M. Like I said, you watch those games, they were feeding him, they were making sure he's a part of the offense, and he was still delivering. Even though obviously like they lost those games, because it's Bowling Green, but he showed out. And I like that fact. Now, obviously, like the only one that I was kind of confused about is how he got shut down against Northern Illinois, which I don't want to slight Northern Illinois, but you know, he didn't have the best game, and I think, like I said it before, tight ends is kind of those kind of weird kind of positions that it could just be that there was an off game, all this kind of stuff. You see it all the time. But overall, I think he's a really good. I think he's a really, really great prospect, but his size is going to limit where he could possibly go. Now, considering all that, there are some offenses that I think could really use his abilities as far as either being an understudy for a veteran or an immediate starter right now and right then. And starting off, I think the Chiefs. Obviously, we talked about Travis Kelce. Well, we had talked about Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce probably going to be at his last year. I mean, I think we thought that might have been last year, but I mean, how much longer does it really have? If you're looking for a receiving option that is going to be able to have good spatial awareness, that's going to have the quickness, that's going to be able to be powerful in his yak ability, you could possibly have Harold Fannin Jr. be that replacement for Travis Hunter and get him at the back end of the second round, because I don't think that he's going to go. I don't think he's going to go middle to high second round pick. Mainly because, like I said, I like him. I like him a lot. But I think because his tight end class is good, there's going to be some people that are going to be like, I can wait a little bit. So he might have to wait to hear his name a little bit later on in the draft. But I would like him to go to the Chiefs. Obviously, you got Andy Reid and his ability to try to find the best spot for each player that he drafts. I also think the fact that I talked about before the Broncos. I feel like they're going to take a tight end. In this sense, he would be the small Taysom Hill role. I think you have Evan Ingram be your tight end one. So like I'm thinking of back in the Saints time with Sean Payton, you got Johnson and you got I just said his name. Goodness gracious. Taysom Hill. Like I said, you have that duo. If you have Harold Fannin Jr. being that kind of role, and you have you have Evan Ingram being the Johnson role, I think that would be a dangerous combo to have for I'm just losing my mind on names right now. Bo Nix, goodness gracious, having Cam Sutton, have Marvin Mims, and having two really good tight ends, I think that could be really dangerous for that offense, where you're not having to spend a pretty high pick on a wide receiver that I think could happen, but instead focusing on, like, say in the first round, okay, I'm gonna take a running back, and the second round take Harold Fannin Jr. I think that's a really great draft starting off for this Broncos team that has invested a lot in their defense, especially in free agency, and now really trying to make sure they can have the horses on offense to be able to compete in the AFC West. I think that would be a great fit for him. So not only the Chiefs, not only the Broncos, but also I want to say the Browns. Now, this is where I kind of started to say about the Browns is obviously they have more pressing needs, but their team is also aging. They need to start kind of thinking about, like, okay, so how long are some of our star players going to continue to improve, going to continue to play at a pretty high level, and also how much do we need to invest on the offensive side of the ball? Because I feel pretty confident that they're going to take Travis Hunter at spec 2. Do they feel he's going to be more wide receiver? Do they feel like more of a cornerback? And then around the way that Harold Fannin is going to be picked, I don't know if he makes it all the way to the third round. If he does, obviously you pick him. But the Browns have so much more pressing needs, but I do love the fit for him to be there with the Browns, being there with David Ajabo, and also with you saw how why am I so bad at names right now? Goodness gracious. Joe Flacco was with David Ajabo. You have two really good tight ends. You have them there. See if Cedric Tillman can take that next step into year 3 with Jerry Jeudy, with potentially Travis Hunter. I think that would be a really dynamic offense that you can make it work with Joe Flacco and then see, like, okay, what are we going to do for the next step of our offense as far as like getting a succession plan, because obviously we know it's not going to be Deshaun Watson. But I think that the Browns are an interesting look to see when are they going to take a tight end, because I feel like they probably are, just because even though Njabo has been done well the last 2 seasons, before then he had a lot of injury history. So I think that there's going to be a lot of people who are looking at making sure that we have insurance policy, especially because I'm pretty sure I feel like he's on either contract like contract talks, and they don't really have the money. So I'm kind of looking at that too. But I think Harold Fannin Jr. to the Browns could be a pretty good fit as well. But I like the first two a whole lot better. Rolling out the end of tier 3, like I said, this is still like I still feel pretty good about them, but they're going to be more of a tight end 2 roles, and that's going to be Mason Taylor. Now, Mason Taylor from LSU, like I said, really, really great route runner as far as like being able to also find space. Is he the best blocker? No, but I think he's a capable blocker. Obviously, a lot better than Terrance Ferguson. And I think that you're able to see like a lot of it. He just runs smoothly, like really, really smooth. Saw especially last year with Jaden Daniels. Last year with Grant Nussmeier, he still had some good moments, but like I think last year, or it just might have been the way that I was watching it, and all the different weapons that he had around him. Like he really, really looked good. I feel, like I said, I have been going back and forth with him and Harold Fannin Jr. I just feel like Mason Taylor is more of in a tight end mold, and that's the reason why I put him a little bit ahead. But it is like very, very slight. One of the things about him too is he has some really good games, like saying it's USC and also South Carolina. Obviously, USC game they lose, South Carolina they end up winning. But both of them, he had pretty good games, and he was a major reason why they were in those games. Obviously, South Carolina the win, or said that before. And then a bad game is Arkansas. Arkansas comes a lot in a lot of these SEC players, and it is just varying. Like I really, like I said, as an Auburn fan, I don't know what was happening with Arkansas that whole entire year. That was just a weird year for them. Same as I think for Oklahoma, it was a lot of ups and downs. But like sometimes they'll shut people down, and sometimes they can't handle anybody. So I just want to preface that too, because that is something that you watch a lot of their games. It is. I love Travis Williams to death, but I just I can't. Hopefully they do better next year. I don't know. Hopefully not against Auburn though. Back to it, but I think that he has a very specific role. I think that he could, like I said, he's still young. I think he's like 20 years old. Obviously, a lot of people are going to point at his dad, like, oh, he has like NFL blood in his veins. I hate that kind of thing. But if you're looking at somebody that I think is going to be able to prove, like I said, right now I feel like he has I think he has a higher ceiling than Harold Fannin Jr. as well. And I'm really interested to see like if he's able to work on his craft, working on some of his route runnings, because I think some of it is a little bit stiff. But as far as like his yak, he just runs. He just feel like he just runs smoothly. It's fun to watch him play. But one of the things I've kind of been seeing, and I kind of agree, is that a lot of people are looking at him in the second round to the Eagles to replace Dallas Goedert, because obviously Eagles looking to kind of ship off Dallas Goedert. I think maybe just because like a cap restraint, trying to make sure like, okay, we already have our top 2 guys. Even though we love Dallas Goedert, we could probably get something for him, because honestly, not only is he in his last year of his contract, but if you look at a lot of the tight ends around the league, a lot of them are about to hit free agency too. So like, if none of them get re-signed, that free agency class is going to be kind of wild. But you get a succession plan for Dallas Goedert. If you can have him for one more year, that's fine, and just let him go to free agency, get a comp pick, that's fine. But if you're able to have him as a tight end too, I think that's perfect for the Eagles. Obviously, the Eagles are they have plenty of talent as it is, but I think that over the next two drafts, it's going to be super important for them to be able to find replacements for a lot of the older picks of their first Super Bowl and getting into their slight rebuild. Because like I said, Eagles very young, very talented roster, but a lot of these players are going to start to get paid, and some of them are like you need to start to fill out that roster because they're pushing a lot of money in the future, and I'm hoping you can get somebody on the cheap, and that's somebody like Mason Taylor in the second round. So Eagles, I think they're a really good fit for him. Already mentioned about the Browns, kind of a similar thing as far as it being like a two tight end set, but he's more of a tight end than I say Harold Fannin Jr. is. And I think that I'm really looking to see if if Njabo is going to be able to be as good as he has been in the last 2 years, or if age is going to finally get up to him, or if he's going to go back to where he was before, where he got injured a good little bit. So Mason Taylor, also another one, and the last one that I'm kind of looking at is the Chargers. Now the Chargers are a team that I feel are absolutely going to go tight end. I think that it's going to be beneficial if they go over the top two, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But if somebody falls to them that they feel like they desperately need to take, then I feel pretty confident that if Mason Taylor somehow finds his way down to pick, I don't know, like 50 something, probably like early 50s for the Chargers, then I feel pretty confident they'll take him right then and there, be perfectly fine, because you know what? Anything about Greg Roman's system, they need tight ends, and they don't have it on the roster right now. So I'll be very surprised if the Chargers do not take at least one of the top two tight ends that I'm about to talk about right now. Now, I want to preface this. I love both the two top tight ends. They are back to back to me. It's very hard for me to decide. I like 1A, 1B. It's strictly depending on what you're going to use the tight end for. So, I'm prefacing this because a lot of people are going to be like, why don't you have this person number one instead of this guy? Because everyone's saying Tyler Warren's number one. I have him at number two, but only slightly. The main reason why I'm putting him there is because I see him more as a utility guy in the same exact way as, like I said, that Harold Fannin Jr. is more of a big slot. I think that Tyler Warren is a man of many hats. He is a wide receiver. He's a tight end. He's a quarterback. He's whatever you want him to be. He's a jack of all trades. However, as being the tight end, I don't feel like he's mastered as well as Colston Loveland has. So that's the reason why I knocked him down just a little bit. But I do think he's an absolute weapon. I think he's going to be a star in the NFL. Do I think he's going to be a superstar? No, but a lot of people are trying to push him as that, and I'm like, I would not take him top 10. I know there's a lot of people who are looking at him like that. I just don't feel that some of the stuff that you're seeing in college is going to translate into the NFL, especially because we've seen it time and time again, especially with tight ends, where there's a little bit of a learning curve as well. I think that some people might be a little bit disappointed that he's not the absolute monster that he was in college. Same thing for Harold Fannin Jr., because I think stats can be kind of deceiving. But let's actually get into Tyler Warren, because I think I've kind of like already said my piece about I think people are hyping up too much, but he is still a really great prospect. So let's talk about him. Obviously, he can do anything that you want for him as far as playing in the big slot, as far as even being like a quarterback, if you want to do like a wildcat formation. And I think that he can fit in a really good role. And you saw it in certain games where he just did everything, and he was the main reason why Penn State looked good on offense. I mean, if you look, obviously the USC game, that was the one game that really blew him up. People were like, oh, talking about him all the time. And another one too is the fact of I wrote it down, but that's not Purdue game. Goodness gracious, the Purdue game. I don't think it's talked about enough, but Purdue game, he had a really good game against them too. Like I said, I think personally that Tyler Warren is going to be good as long as he's put in a role where he is not just strictly the tight end. If he is able to move around and create a lot of mismatches, then I feel like he's going to fit well in the NFL. The only really bad game I had for him was Illinois. Like I said, a lot of these bad games are just like might just not have been in the game plan instead of being quote unquote shut down. But let's get into like some of the fits. Obviously, everyone's talking about him going to the Colts. I can see it. I really can. Where you're like basically giving no excuses to Anthony Richardson. I mean, I kind of can see the same thing if they took Colston Loveland there too, which I'll talk about next. But I think that the Colts have a lot more pressing needs on defense than going tight end first. But that would be amazing for him to go to the Colts because not only do you have a pretty good offensive mind, I think Shane Steichen's still a pretty good offensive mind, just unfortunately bad quarterback play. But you have really good weapons around you that are going to be able to you can be the guy that moves around with Josh Downs, with Alec Pierce, with Adonai Mitchell, with Michael Pittman Jr. Yes, I just listed 4 wide receivers that the Colts have with inadequate quarterback play. There's a chance that if they do take Tyler Warren, they also need to get rid of one of those weapons because why would you have 5 tier 2 weapons that you can't give all the shares to? You can't share all the catches. So that's nothing to the reason why I'm not super high on him going to the Colts. But I think there's other places I think he can fit even better. Obviously, if he does go top 10, the potential is him going to the Jets. And I'm fine with that if they put him in a role where he's able to move around, he's able to help out Garrett Wilson, get some free releases. If he's able to help Garrett Wilson, let's just say that in the screen action as well, where people are concerned about him in the screen action, and you have Garrett Wilson, almost people lose sight of him. I feel like I can work on it with the Jets. Like I said, I like Tyler Warren in a certain set of him moving around in the role of a Taysom Hill, and that's where it goes to the Broncos. I think that if he goes to the Broncos, I think Sean Payton's going to work is going to get his guy, his version of Taysom Hill, and he's going to be able to work well with him. Kind of what I just said about the fact that you have if you had Harold Fannin Jr. on the Broncos, he would fit that same exact role. Tyler Warren's even better because not only is he a bigger body, more physical, even more physical than Harold Fannin, which is kind of wild. But I think he also has better route running ability than Harold Fannin Jr. Obviously, he needs a lot more help. I think if he's able to just fit in a role, I feel pretty confident with him. But him and Evan Ingram with Bo Nix, I think that would work wonders for the Broncos offense as far as elevating them. Obviously, they would have to take him at pick 20 if he falls that far, or trade up to get him. So like I said, I think he's going to be good, but I just want to kind of quirl some of the super duper hype that he's getting because I think that's unwarranted. Now, going to one, like I said, already said before, Colston Loveland. The reason why I'm putting Colston Loveland a little bit higher is because I really, really like his route running ability. Like I said, he has really, really great routes. Not only his blocking is pretty good too. And like you said, you saw it over the last 2 years. Obviously, he did get injured. You saw the last 2 years of him showing up and showing out as being a star in the Michigan. I think that if anything, he could be I want to say Tucker Kraft because I think Tucker Kraft is another really, really good option that I think is ascending. I think he can be that. Do I think that he's going to be, like I said, I don't think any of these tight ends are going to be superstars like a Brock Bowers, like a Travis Kelce, like that kind of thing. I think he's top 10. I think he's top 5. But in that, 9 to 12 range of tight ends, I feel pretty good about that. I feel pretty good about that as rookies, as they start to grow in the NFL, because, like I said, there's that learning curve. But Colston Loveland, I think his route running is better than Tyler Warren. I think his blocking is better than Tyler Warren. I think overall he's a better tight end than Tyler Warren is. So that's why I put him slightly above. One of the things that you can just show out immediately is some of the stuff on tape. Oregon and also against Michigan State. Like I said, both of them, he was legit a difference maker in both those games. Did Michigan do that well? No. A lot of it had to do with really bad quarterback play. But even besides that, he showed up and he showed out in those games. Now, obviously, the bad game was Indiana. Indiana was also really good last year. Like I said, I'll talk about some of their players. We're really only one player that I'll mainly talk about because I really love him later on. But bad quarterback play really hurt his season. compared to Drew Aller, who I think it has potential. He hasn't hit that yet, but way better than anything that Michigan was putting out this past season. So I'm not putting that totally on the fall of Colston Loveland. Now, some of the fits. I think it's pretty similar to Tyler Warren, but in a different setting as far as just being a true tight end. Chargers, obviously Jim Harbaugh will love him because he had him for years. And I think that he would fit the role of like a Greg Roman offense. Another thing too that I think he could work out well is with the Jets as far as being the route technician instead of being the explosive guy. I think being a route technician with Garrett Wilson, who you desperately need Justin Fields to try to work out, so you get somebody who's going to be able to get separation early, not later on in the route, and someone who's got really strong hands and knows his way around the field as far as like spatial awareness. I think it's going to be really good for Colston Loveland, even though I think that's a little bit too high. I can understand the hype for Tyler Warren going up that high, but I don't think Colston Loveland's going to go that high. That'll be if the Jets decide to trade down, which I don't think they're going to do. And the last one that I kind of want to talk about is the Colts. Yes, I just talked about the fact that I don't like the fact that Tyler Warren going to the Colts. I wouldn't be super duper happy if Colston Loveland went to the Colts, but I can understand as far as more of a, like I said, tight end. I think Tyler Warren's a good player. I feel like I keep on saying this because I feel like people are going to say it's a slight. I'm not trying to slight him. I'm just saying as far as like an actual tight end, I think Colston Loveland's better. And I think as far as being a route runner, as far as someone who's going to be able to get open early for Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, but more likely Anthony Richardson, that would be great for him because, like I said, you need somebody who's going to be open early because I think that you need to show Anthony Richardson going through progressions, and a lot of times he starts to get a little bit frantic, and you can see it because he's just relying on his athletic ability. Be able to calm him down. If it's not open, go to the check down, and that's going to be Colston Loveland who's going to be able to get you 5-6 yards after the catch. I feel like it's going to be good for the Colts offense as far as like trying to show that Anthony Richardson can be the guy. Obviously, like I said, it's a little bit shorter video than the other ones. I really like this tight end draft class. I think there's potential of being like 2 stars and then 4 like really good roles. Tight end is really one of the hard ones to try to predict in the NFL, so it really depends on where they go. But I'm super excited to see where they see how they progress. If you want to let me know what you think in the comments below, obviously I love to hear any of your draft takes or anything like that. But without further ado, that's going to be the end of the video. Next one up is going to be the offensive linemen. I'm just going to group all of them together. That's going to be a long one because we tackles and also interior offensive line. So, it's going to be a little bit longer one. This is going to be a little bit shorter. But also a reminder that on Thursday is going to be the draft. Obviously, the first round. Going to be streaming on here with Luke, and we're going to break down every single draft pick. And hopefully, both of our teams, the Texans and the Panthers, pick good players because I have a feeling that one, if not both of us, are going to be disappointed. Definitely the Texans. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.